So now I'll get into my color palette. Right now you see the colors that I've laid out already. I picked the colors that I feel are closest to David that can add a little spice to my painting, but also stay a little bit more on the grisaille, which is a black and white painting. I'll be using titanium white, yellow ochre, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, purple, dioxazine purple, Payne's gray, and ivory black. And I'm using a mixture of both Grumbacher Max as well as Winsor Newton. And then I also have a paint thinner that I'll be using later, and this is just water. Have your palette light knife ready, and I have a gray paper palette that I can just dispose of afterwards. So for me, when I'm teaching and I'm looking at my students' work, one big thing that I look at is their color palette. What I'm going to do is mix a couple colors for you so you understand what we're looking for. So the basic of this is a sculpture. So I want to mix something neutral. On this side, I have Payne's gray, and over here I have ivory black. So let's take a little bit of both and give you an idea of what happens. So if you take Payne's gray and put that down, and I have a tissue off to the side so I'm not messing up my colors. And then I'll also take some ivory black, put that over here. I'm going to pick up on a little bit of titanium white and add it to the mixture. Because of my sculpture being primarily black and white, I'll probably mix more of these colors. So I'm adding just a little bit more white. And then I have those on standby so I can just add more to my mixture. Anytime you put paint down on your palette, remember that the first time you use the tube, typically what happens is once you open it, there's extra oil in there. So you'll have to squeeze some out into your tissue so that that oil doesn't go all over your palette. But the second thing I do is I usually go color coordinated. So it's kind of warm to cool is how I work, light to dark. And then I always buy a larger tube of titanium white, and I keep my paints off to the side. So you want to make sure you don't squeeze too much out. At least this is how I work. Every artist is different. I prefer to squeeze less out and then add more rather than having too much extra and not being able to put it back into the tube. So you'll see how I mix. I'm pulling the paint up like this, and then I put it down and then use the back side. So you want to get out the marbleization in your paint. So let's just remove this so we can mix some paint. We won't be using water with the color mixing, just the paint. So I'm using the back side of the palette. I'll go a little slower, and I'm trying to get out that marble effect, and then scoop it up, put it back down, and just repeat that process. So now I have a tint of Payne's gray. So I've mixed Payne's gray with white, which is giving me a tint. Now over here I have ivory black. So I'm going to take off this paint. You can also use a rag, and I'm going to do the same process here. I'll add a little bit more ivory black to this mixture. So now you can see that with the ivory black, I've got more of a little bit of a warm gray. And then over here, I have a little bit more of a cool gray with the blues. If you want the tints to be the same, we can add a little bit more white to this mixture. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give myself multiple colors that can help me get David. So David also has some warm undertones. That's why I have the yellow ochre here. I'm gonna go ahead and take a little bit of both of these, bring it over here, and I'm actually going to relocate this off to the side, okay? And then again, just wipe that, just take some of this. You want to collect all your paint into a little pool like that, and then put it off to the side. That way you have a mixing area in the center. And another reason why you want to keep all that paint kind of isolated together in one little section, because if you spread it out too much, it starts to dry on you. So keeping it in a little lump is preferred. So I took some of that paint, I have it here. And it doesn't matter if they mix because I'm going to kind of use both of them for my painting. I'll take a little bit more titanium white, throw that in there. And then I'm going to take a hint of yellow ochre. So when you're mixing paint, keep in mind that it's kind of like baking cookies or making a cake. I'm giving you guys the ingredients, but I'm not really measuring anything out. In this case, I'm just picking it up and looking at the color to see what it's giving me. You may already know But if you study color theory, you know that if you take a black and you mix it with yellow, that's going to give you a green, okay? So I'm using color theory here in terms of mixing. I know that if I'm pulling some of this and this one, this has black in it, and I added some yellow ochre, and so I'm going to get a little variation of a neutral green. And that's what I want. I think that's a great addition to warm this up. So I'm pulling up different types of grays. I'll just add that to the mix over here, okay? And let's make another one. So you can take any of these mixtures. I go for color unification. So you'll notice that I'm taking a little bit of this one, putting it here, taking a little bit of this one, putting it here, adding a little bit more white so that my entire palette is unified. And if you're painting one entire painting, you want to make sure that you're mixing enough of the color so that you don't have to remix it again. We'll take this and we'll warm it up a little bit by using a little bit of burnt umber. I've opted for burnt umber over raw umber because burnt umber is going to give you that ruddy color added to it. So that'll pick up on some of these browns that you see in here. We're going to take all of these and again, mix them together. So I'm using the back side of my palette knife and squishing it down. Then you'll collect that up and put it back down and repeat the process to get out that marbleization. This actually gives me a really nice brown that looks almost exactly like my palette. So it makes you realize that if you're trying to mix a neutral brown, a neutral gray, you may not just use black and white. You may need a little bit of yellow ochre in there to actually warm it up a little bit. So we've mixed it right back to the palette, which is pretty cool. We'll take that mixture, let's add some to it. So I'm actually gonna take all of that white, put it in here, and then that's why you always have more, so you can just put more back onto your palette. I'll add a little bit of, let's just mix this together. See what we get from there. It's gonna give me a tint, which is a little lighter version of that. I think this neutral gray is awesome. I'm actually probably gonna use a lot more of it. I'll take the same colors I used before, and it's okay if they're slightly off. I'm taking more white, a little bit of this gray, a little bit of this gray, and actually I can take this one because it already has the yellow in it, so it speeds up the process. And then I'll just mix them all together. So now you're seeing here that our mixture is a little lighter than the actual palette paper, which is okay because we need those light values in there anyway. But I do want some darks, so instead of putting black in the whole thing, what I'll do is I'll take some of this, bring it off to the side, and create another color. So now we'll take a little bit of the ivory black and put it in there. Ivory black has a little bit more of the yellow aspect to it versus Mars black, which has a little bit more of the blue. So now I've darkened up that value right there, okay? And I'm gonna add a little bit more to it. So let's take some raw umber and add that to the mixture. I just don't want it so gray, okay? So we're warming it up again, and instead of warming it up fully, we're gonna cool it back down. So the brown is warming that up, and I don't really have enough. So I'm gonna take a little bit of white, because remember, I'm trying to paint my entire painting here using the paint that I've already mixed without having to mix too much extra. So we're just gonna add more to the mixture and blend that all together, giving me a nice neutral, warm brown. Now I do like this gray as well, so I don't necessarily want to lose it because I can use that in the painting also. So instead what I'll do is I'll collect it, I'll put it over here, and then I'm actually going to take some of it, bring it back, and then I'll take some of this and add a little bit of purple to it. So when I first, oh, that's a lot of purple. So this is a lot, and what's going to happen is you're going to see it take over all of this. But it's okay because you're making different colors that you can use. So purple, it's pretty strong with that aspect of red. It really dominates the entire piece. And you could see that none of that purple is really going to exist on my David. So I wouldn't say it's useless, but probably not the color you want to use if you're color matching. It's not even a waste though. So you want to think about how you can tone something down, okay? Well, if you know color theory, and you know the complementary colors, the complement of purple is yellow. So what we can do is we could actually take a little bit of yellow ochre, add to this mixture, and to make it a little darker, we can take some of the burnt umber and also add it to the mixture. And then this would be a great color to use in some areas of the shadow mask. So let's go ahead and mix this up. I'll probably have to darken it up even more. I'm staying away from the Payne's gray because I don't really want it to turn that dark. I just want like a nice transitional color. So using the brown will help make it darker. Using the yellow will tone it down, and staying away from the black and then the Payne's gray, because those are my darkest colors on my palette. So see how that's getting darker, and it is something now we can use. You see that? Okay. So I wouldn't ever freak out when you make a color. There's a reason why I chose the colors that I chose, because I could actually see those in David, in the sculpture there. Okay. And that's a nice kind of mauve looking color. Let's add that over there. Okay. So I'm getting these mixtures so that I can use. Now I've used every single color, but let's make some other ones. Let's make something that's a little bit more warm, neutral. Now I have this on my palette knife. I could either take it off or I could use it. I'm actually just going to use it. So I'm going to take my yellow, put it down, because I want to make kind of like a cream color, but I don't want that cream color to be too light. So having this purple undertone will darken it up. So we're just going to take this and mix. Now I know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at this and you're thinking, how does she know what colors to use? How does she know the outcome? It's just a lot of practice. And the great thing about color mixing is you make mistakes and you learn from them. So in the beginning, I would take notes. I'd put this down. I'd really study color theory and understand exactly what I'm doing and why the colors mix the way they mix. I even do color charts to kind of figure these things out. But do you see how we've got a nice creamy color here, but it's not too yellow, you know? It's more of a muted color. Why is it muted? Because that purple's in there and they're complementary colors. I do think it's a little too strong, too intense, too saturated. So we're actually going to tone it down by making more of a tint out of it. So we're going to take this titanium white and add it to it. We're getting somewhat similar to a Naples yellow color, a little bit more of a muted Naples yellow. So you don't have to buy every single color that you see in an art store. You could make it if you know color theory. And some of this paint that's actually on the palette, if I pull it over here, see this purple residue? If I pull it over here, it's actually going to suck that up and mix in with my paint. So it's kind of like I'm cleaning my palette at the same time as I'm mixing. So you can see that in there, that marbleization. So we'll just pick all this up again and mix again, okay? And when I was in school, I would actually store this palette in my freezer with the lid on it. So you have a lid that goes with it, and you could just keep it in the freezer and, you know, keep painting every day. This is a great color to use. I probably would not use much of it. So I'm going to take the majority of it and change it. So I'll save a little bit of it. So we'll save this and then I'll change the rest of it, because I'm just looking at my sculpture and I can't see how I could be using a lot of that color. But a little bit I can. So I want to change it to something else. So let's kind of problem solve this. If you have something that's a yellow base, okay, and you mix it with something blue, obviously you're going to get something green. Well, we kind of already have a green here. So let's think about something else. Maybe our darkest darks. Okay, so the darkest darks on David, I would say, are kind of like a purpley brown kind of color with a little bit of undertone of yellow. So we're going to change this color to an actual shadow mask. It seems weird because we added so much white to it. But we need a lot of shadow mass in here, so I'm actually not that afraid of putting a lot of paint in here and mixing up a nice strong mixture. So let's do that now. We're going to take a little bit of the burnt umber, and that's actually a lot. Okay, so I take a lot of it and put it in there. Okay, and then I already know I want to cool that down with a little bit of purple. Okay, so we're going to put that in. That's a lot of purple. Let me actually take some off. Okay, so I just took some off my palette knife. And I'm going to insert that there. And I know because of the titanium white, it's going to be a very light mixture. So I'm actually going to dive into some of the Payne's gray. This is Payne's gray right here. So it's not too black. It's more of a blue base. And I'm actually going to add a little bit more burnt umber in there. And I haven't mixed anything, but in my mind, I kind of have a feeling of what's happening. And you may not. So you may have to mix and see from there. So look, we're going to just stir that all up. Take that and mix it. So you can see how that burnt umber really gets it darker. I'm going to pull a little bit more of that purple in there because I don't want it to turn too green with the mixtures of the blue and the yellow. This is looking gorgeous. I'm loving it. This color is really nice, but I think it would definitely sing with purple. Adding some aspects of red into it helps. So because I don't have red in my color palette, that purple is what's going to give me the aspect of red along with that burnt umber. Okay, do you see that? That's so pretty. So this is a gorgeous shadow mask. I'm really excited about it. I feel like I need more of it. And so you really have to think about what you're mixing, because sometimes, like I said, there's happy accidents. For me, I pretty much know what I'm doing, so it's all kind of making sense. But I'm gonna go ahead and add more purple. I will add more burnt umber, a little bit, just a little bit of yellow ochre, because I don't want it to turn green, okay? A little bit of Payne's gray, and we'll mix it up again, okay? So let's take that. And it's okay if it gets dark, okay? A little bit darker, because it's a shadow mask, it's okay. But I have a lot more of it, so I'm excited. It's kind of that like purpley mauve brown color. So a nice warm and cool shadow mask here. This is very pretty, okay? Instead of just opting for, you know, black and white. So we're warming him up a little bit. So this is great, I love it. Let's take that, that's gonna be our primary shadow mask here. I'm gonna put it right next to the other dark. So now you can see how I have multiple values that I can use in there. And you can rearrange this whole setup here. I usually put my water, this little water container back on my palette when I work. It makes it easier for me. So I might even just move this one down so that I can have room for my water. I'm gonna clean off my knife and let's see what else we can mix. So I need what we call a local color. So a local color is gonna be like your base color for your light mask. And I have a lot of brown here, and if I'm thinking light mask, this is definitely gonna influence that. So on my palette, I'm actually just gonna take a little bit of water on my tissue, and then I'm just wiping this out. That way I have a little bit more wiggle room to get the light mask that I want without a lot of those shadows creeping in. Clean palette knife. Again, no water has been mixed in here. You don't need water to clean your palette knife. You just wipe it off and you keep going. So this area of the chest, I'm trying to get more of a light mask. I'm actually gonna just take all of the white, put it down. I'll take a hint of this brown, I'm sorry, brown, gray, and put it down. And then I like this like yellowy, so I'll put that in there too. And then we'll mix that up. So it's not quite a stark white. It's more of a very, very strong tint of gray, okay? Very, very light gray. And again, some of the palette, like the colors that I wiped it off. And some of those colors, so you can see that in there. Some of those colors will mix, and it's okay because we want color unification. So this will be like my highlight. With David, I don't want to use like a strong white highlight because he's not shiny. And when you think about painting, you also have to think about what you're painting. So for instance, if you look at my skin, notice how, unless I'm like greasy, my skin's not gonna reflect, you know, that much because your skin absorbs the light. So you see a little bit of shine in there, but not too much. Versus like my ring, you can see how that is like picking up on, you know, that reflective quality. I like to kind of have this set up here so that when I work, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I have like a little pre-mixture going on, and then I can just directly apply that to the painting, which I've already drawn out. So I already have my painting, well, I have the start of my painting here. I've done this in graphite, so before I start, I would actually come in and just take a kneaded eraser and lighten some of this out so that it's not too, you don't want the pencil to mix with your paint, okay? So some people spray fix this. They'll take a spray fixative, take it outside. Don't do it inside, but they'll take a spray fixative and you'll see that I'm pressing and twisting, okay? There's some residue from when my hand was sitting on the paper and kind of smudging some, but I just need enough to see it. I don't need anything harsh. I can still rub out some of this residue. This part's not really gonna affect my painting too much. Any construction lines, you really don't need them in this piece. So if I can get them out, I'll get them out. So I at least try to, but that's a great way to, and when I say construction lines, it's mainly like the plumb and level lines that I'm trying to wipe out, these horizontal vertical lines. If you watched my other video, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm trying to get that out because in the end, I just want a really nice painting. The structure I will not take out. So anything that is giving me the actual structure, like in the knees, that we're not going to take out because that's going to be part of the painting itself, okay? On this particular painting, I'm actually going to do something in the background, so I'm not too concerned with, you know, outlines and all that because we're going to hide all that. But a lot of times people will do a painting and they'll leave the white canvas exposed. So if that's the case, you want to keep in mind that you want to erase out as much pencil as possible if you're trying to utilize the actual canvas of, you know, the white canvas. I like to cover it up because the canvas has a lot of texture to it, which is a little different when you apply paint. So even if I wanted a white background, I'd apply paint to it versus just using the raw canvas that's here. By the way, this is a canvas pad and it is 16 by 20 and it's already gessoed. So if you're using something that does not have gesso on it, you'll want to make sure that you pre-gesso your surface, whether it's a panel, a wooden panel, or if it's just canvas paper or an actual canvas. Because if you don't gesso it, then all of your paint will just seep through whatever you're working on and it won't stick. So you always want to work on something that has the gesso on it or you're gessoing it. So I'm just rubbing out my drawing with a kneaded eraser. So I'm not trying to literally erase it, okay? But I'm trying to definitely get it lighter. And I always do that before I paint. I don't want any outlines to show in this drawing because it is more of a colored painting than it is a drawing, but I wanted to get that structure established. So just rubbing that out on that canvas to at least this level. And then I'll start applying the paint. So I have that there. Now you've got your canvas ready to go. You've got your paint ready to go. You always want to work fat over lean. So what I mean by that is with water soluble oils, you could literally just use water, which is why I have this. And you can dilute this almost like watercolor and paint it on your canvas. It'll dry a lot faster because the thinner the paint, the quicker it dries. There's also certain paint that dries faster than others. So an example would be the neutral colors like a burnt umber, raw sienna, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, ivory black. All these colors do dry a lot faster than your cadmiums. There's two cadmiums. Cadmiums are like your brighter ones. Those take longer to dry. Alizarin crimson also takes longer to dry. So get used to the properties of your paint. Different paint dries at different times. And so if you want to go for an underpainting or painting that's just, you know, faster, go for more of the neutral colors. So all of these paints will dry a little faster than if I were to add the bright, you know, full color palette on here. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind too. So I will be working with a little bit of water solution. If you use water with water soluble oils, what happens is a little bit of the color pigmentation gets compromised. And so I also have the thinner. Okay, so if you're using traditional oil paints, you could use a turpentine or whatever you want to do, mineral spirits for your dilutant of your paint. Water works as well for this water soluble oil. Traditional oil paints, you'd want to use whatever thinner you're using, but you can use something like this, which actually maintains the properties of the color a little bit better. It is low odor, but you want to make sure you're always well ventilated whenever you're working in any situation that has any type of solvents, even if it's water soluble. Just make sure your your area has ventilation. So this is ready to go. I can continue mixing more, but a lot of times I have a pre-mixture here, and then some of these will mix together on my piece, and then as well as pulling from here and creating new colors. So I just wanted to show you this foundation, which will match somewhat of what David looks like. And I think every time you do a painting, your color palette is a direct reflection of what your painting is going to look like. So an example would be if you want really bright colors on your painting, or you're looking for really nice skin tones, but your color palette looks like mine, you know you're not going to get that. So really pay attention to what you're doing here and how that's a direct reflection to what your painting is going to look like. So join me for the next video if you want to see how this gets applied to the painting.